Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Deku met Mina before going to the Udade Academy, and started dating her, part 2. So before we start, please go check out the author of this fanfic, Spiral Turtle 6, link is in the description, also subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's begin the video. Izuku looked out the window of the train, as he rode the mechanical transport vehicle to UA. He finally did it. He was in Japan's most prestigious high school. Not only that, he had a friend now. Speaking of Mina, the pink girl had said that she would be waiting for Izuku at the train station that morning. She seemed like she was excited for their first day at Udade, if her tidal wave of stickers was anything to go off of. I did it! All Might. The boy's mind went to his meeting with All Might the night he got his acceptance letter. After learning about Midoriya's new friend, All Might had reiterated that it's imperative that Izuku keep the secret of him, and one for all to himself. Not that he had little faith in his apprentice. On that note, he told Izuku to not tell others that he was being trained by the number one hero. Izuku was brought out of his musings by the train coming to a stop. Looking up, he instantly saw his pink friend standing on the platform waving to him. He got up, and made his way outside the train. Midori! The boy smiled when Mina stepped in front of him. Good morning, Mina, he greeted the girl standing in front of him. When he looked down at her uniform, his face became neon red. Mina was attractive, and the uniform just added to that. So how do I look? She struck a pose after doing a little twirl, which made Izuku blush brighter. Of course Mina saw the blush. She was sure a blind person would be able to see it, so she jumped on the chance to tease her easily flustered friend. It looks good on you. Izuku tried to cover his face to hide his blush, but he was failing spectacularly if the giggling and chuckles from the other train goers had anything to say about it. Just good? Mina fake pouted while trying to keep from laughing out loud. If it was a sport to tease Izuku, then she was sure that she'd get first prize. Figurative steam was now leaking from the boy's ears. That was all it took for her to finally let out her laughter. Come on, Casanova, let's get going. She grabbed the boy's wrist and started dragging him towards UA. Mina and Izuku stood in front of the door that would lead to their classroom. To say the door was big would be an understatement. The door was massive. While Mina stared up at the door with wonder in her eyes, do giants attend this school? My thoughts exactly, Izuku thought, as he reached out towards the door, but paused when he thought about something. Behind this door was the one person who had tormented him his whole life. That made him think about what had happened the other day at his school. Both he and Bakugo had been called into the guidance counselor's office, where he expressed his surprise that the two of them had made it into Udade, especially Izuku. Later in the day, Bakugo had cornered the timid boy behind the school, and tried to get him to admit that he cheated somehow. He refused to accept that Izuku got in without a quirk, as he said/shouted. Though, he had surprised Bakugo by grabbing on the explosive teen's wrist, and saying that he had to accept that Izuku was now at Udade, and if he couldn't then he had to get over it. Well, at least that other guy isn't here. He was referring to the boy who had a problem with him, and Mina throughout the entrance exam. Who? Mina tilted her head at Izuku, saying something random. No, Izuku froze when he opened the door. Of course his luck had to be this poor. Not only was he in a class with his childhood friend turned bully, but now he had to look forward to the one person who would be berating him for everything. What's the hold up? Mina peeked around Izuku, and saw the person who had a problem with her, and Izuku on the day of the entrance exam. Suffice to say, Mina was not happy. Oh, senior, stick up, but take your feet off the table. The glasses-wearing teen shouted at a blonde teen, Katsuki Bakugo, who scoffed at him. Shut the fuck up, 4 eyes, he spat out. I'm already pissed, as it is. Don't piss me off, or I'll fucking kill ya. Obviously the glasses-wearing teen didn't take too kindly to the threat. Are you threatening me? How dare you? What kind of person threatens their own classmate, and on the first day? He was making a chopping motion with his arms, which was actually comical to watch. What's it to you, jackass? Bakugo looked like he was a second away from blasting the boy through the wall. I can damn well threaten whoever I want to fucking threaten. Listen, I think we got off on the wrong foot. The teen with glasses signed, my name Tenya Ida. I come from Somei Junior High. It's nice to meet you. He reached out for a handshake, but the blonde in front of him looked at the hand like it was the most disgusting thing in the world. Oh, so you came from that posh school. So what, huh? You think you're better than me? Huh? You asshole, the boy growled, slapping the offered hand away. Izuku and Mina, as well as everyone in the class, were watching this exchange with looks that ranged from wonder to weariness. Hey, it's you guys. Everybody finally noticed the two at the door because of the floating uniform, and the class called out to them Ashido-san, and Izuku. Midoriya. Izuku introduced himself. Hey Hagak, your Mina waved at the floating clothes with a grin. It's good to see you again. You too. They turned their attention to Ida, who called out to them, "I have something to say to you." He walked towards them. Mina stepped around Izuku, and stood in front of the approaching Ida with a frown on her face. She still didn't really like this guy, which was weird, since she was the girl that made friends with almost anyone. But to her, friendship is a give and take kind of relationship. If this guy didn't want to get off their case for everything, then she didn't want to associate herself with him. "What do you want?" she asked the boy, stopping him in his tracks with her harsh tone. "Going to harp on us some more?" The teen blinked in genuine confusion before it dawned on him what she was talking about. He quickly lifted his hands and made an X sign over his chest. "I think you might have misreading my intent here." He put his hands to his sides and bowed at a perfect 90-degree angle, surprising the two in front of him. "I'm sorry I came across as harsh on the day of the entrance exam. I just wanted to introduce myself. I am..." "Yeah, we heard," at least the guy apologized. Mina could cut him some slack. "I'm Mina Ishido. Izuku Midoriya. It's nice to meet you." "Ishido-san, Midoriya-san." Ida stood up again, and both of you realized that there was more to the practical exam. "Didn't you?" "Huh." Mina and Izuku were even more confused. Ida carried on, despite their confusion. "That was very perceptive of the two of you, and I have completely misjudged both of you. I thought you were both just troublemakers, and I must admit, as students, you two are far more superior to me." "I doubt that," the two thought with a sweat drop. Everybody turned their attention elsewhere when they heard the sound of a chair clattering to the floor. Bakugo had gotten up from his seat, and he looked pissed as he stared at the three people at the door. "You," he hissed, pointing at the two that just entered, confusing one and scaring the other. He stomped over to them with his hands curled like an animal about to claw someone's eyes out. Midoriya started sweating bullets. He knew that look. Someone was about to get hurt, and if previous experiences told him anything, then it was probably going to be him. Why now, so early in the morning? He internally screamed in despair while looking at the murderous gaze of his bully. Odd, it seemed like Bakugo hadn't even noticed him. He didn't even give the green-haired teen a glance. If he wasn't looking at him, then that could only mean, "Hold on, Kaken." Izuku took a step in front of Mina, and held his hands up while his body shook like a leaf. "You don. Shut the fuck up, Deku, before I put a hole through your fucking face." Bakugo shouted. "I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to that raccoon-eyed bitch." He pointed at Mina, both surprising and pissing her off. "What did you call me?" Mina tried to get past Izuku, who held his arms out to keep her back. "What the hell is your problem? You are, bitch." Small explosions went off in Bakugo's hands. "You stole first place from me. The hell do you get off with that bullshit amount of rescue points? Whose pathetic ass did you have to save to suck up to the people watching? Stole from you? What, do you think you own the first place spot or something?" Screw how Ida acted the other day. If he was annoying, then this guy was downright unbearable. "Hey, what's going on?" Another voice joined the conversation/argument going on. "Oh, Ishido," and the curly-haired boy. The others turned their attention to Uraraka, who was standing behind Mina in the doorway. "Uraraka-san, hello," greeted Izuku, as he tried to keep Mina from pushing past him to attack the explosive teen, who was being blocked by Ida. "Don't worry about this. Get out of my fucking way." More explosions went off in Bakugo's hands, as he glared up at Ida. "I will not have you attack our fellow classmate." Ida stood his ground with his arms spread out. "This is highly unethical for a student of U.A. I didn't ask for a fucking lecture, now move, dipshit." Bakugo reached forward to move Ida, and give him some burns from the explosions going off in his hands. He was stopped by tape wrapping around his wrists and mouth. "Why must your brats be so loud?" A voice behind Uraraka spoke up. A scruffy-looking man with black clothing stood there. The white tape-like scarf around his neck was extended past all of them, and restrained a struggling Bakugo. And you turned his glare onto said teen. "Watch yourself." This is a hero school that seemed to catch the explosive blonde's attention, making him stop struggling, but not stop glaring at Mina and Izuku. "Now all of you go sit down," he recalled his tape scarf. The teens at the door quickly went to their seats so as to not incur more annoyed wrath from the man at the door. The man walked over to the front of the room, while dragging a yellow sleeping bag behind him, and glanced over all the students with his tired gaze. "My name is Shota Aizawa. I'm going to be your homeroom teacher." He reached into the sleeping bag, and pulled out a blue uniform with white strips that formed a U and an A together. "All of you go, and get changed into these clothes. When you're done, meet me outside." A Quirk assessment test? The class of 1A all currently stood outside on the Udata training field. In front of them stood their homeroom teacher, who didn't even react to their combined exclamation. "But what about orientation?" asked Uraraka. "Won't we miss the ceremony? If you kids want to be professionals, then you shouldn't be wasting your time on pointless things like that." Aizawa sighed. He turned around, and tossed a ball at Bakugo, who caught it. "Here at U.A. we don't work on normal school traditions, which means I can run my class however I see fit. Now, since you like to show off, Bakugo, why don't you go ahead and start us off? How far could you throw a softball in junior high? Bakugo threw the ball up and down in his hand as he glared at Aizawa, who didn't even bat an eyelash at his attempt at intimidation. He scoffed, but answered the man's question. 67 meters, I think. Good. Now try it with your quirk. Aizawa pointed to the circle that extended into a cone shape. When Bakugo was situated in the circle, he did some stretches. As Aizawa continued to list the rules, anything goes, just as long as you don't step out of the circle. You asked for it. Bakugo gripped the ball in his hands and took a wind-up die. He shouted, as a loud explosion went off in his hand, making the ball fly so far in the air that you couldn't see it until the ball dropped to the floor. Suffice to say, everyone was shocked at this explosive display of power. All of you should know the limit of your abilities. They turned their attention to Aizawa, who held up the device in his hands which read 705.2 m. Then you should go beyond those limits. It's the most rational way of becoming a hero. Wow, that looks like fun! Mina cheered. I want to go. She didn't like Bakugo, but she had to admit his performance was impressive. Fun? Aizawa glared at Mina, who shrank back. Idiots, you're here for 3 years to train to be heroes in the future. You all think this is fun? An evil smirk appeared on Aizawa's face. Fine. Let's see how fun this is when there's more at stake. All of you will compete in 8 physical assessments. Whoever comes in last will be expelled. That got the whole class to gasp. At the U.A we only train the best with the most potential. Whoever is in last has no potential, so they shouldn't even be here. But that's unfair, shouted Hagakure, with the majority of the class nodding their heads. Life is unfair. Get used to it. What Aizawa said was true. Everything is unfair. No one should expect special treatment no matter who you are. The minute the exam started, it was readily apparent that everyone was in a league of their own. Some were good at certain assessments while others were good at other assessments. Some had unbelievable strength, and others were super fast. Everybody was different, and that was the same with their quirks. When it came to speed, Ida blew everyone out of the water with his speed. His quirk, Engine, allowed him to run super fast, so a 50-meter dash was a piece of cake to him. However, that doesn't mean you can count out the others though. Everyone found different ways to utilize their quirks to do different tests. For example, Mina was paired to go up against a teen with a belt around his stomach, named Yugo Oyama. Aoyama's quirk allowed him to shoot out a beam from his stomach, which he used to blast himself towards the finish line. However, it only held out for so long, so he had to get back up and shoot again. Mina, on the other hand, used her acid to skate along the ground, easily overtaking Aoyama. However, when you were someone like Izuku, it's like bringing a toothpick to a sword fight. His quirk had 2 settings, 0% or 100%. If he used 100, then he was stuck with broken limbs, so that only left him with 0%. To the average person he might have stood a chance, but against people who had their whole lives to learn everything about their quirks, he was at a disadvantage. So in layman's terms, he was royally screwed. Are you okay, Midori? Izuku looked up from his sitting position to see Mina looking down at him with concern. He had been mulling over what All Might had said 3 weeks ago. The number 1 hero had explained that Izuku had to remember how it feels to use one for all at its max, but it was hard to explain. In the end, it was mostly just adrenaline that kept him doing everything the day of the exams. The need to protect someone does tend to overshadow other feelings sometimes. Yeah, the boy looked down at his crossed legs. I'm just thinking. Wanna talk about it? Aizawa had given them a 10-minute break to catch their breath. It was considerably kind for the teacher that gave off such a take to no bullshit vibe, though everyone suspected that he was just doing it so that he could catch a nap. I'm guessing it has to do with the fact that you can't use your quirk without breaking your bones. When the boy flinched, she knew that she was right on the money. Everyone has such good quirks. Izuku looked down at his hand and made a fist. If I can't use my quirk, I'm nothing more than dead weight. Dead weight, Mina sat down next to Izuku, leaning on her arms and looking towards the sky. It was true that if Izuku can't use his limbs, then he would basically be like a snowball in hell. Well, I might not be the smartest person around, but why don't you bounce your thoughts off of me? It could help. It won't hurt, honestly, Izuku thought. As long as he doesn't mention anything that links to One for All Might, or that his quirk was given to him, then he should be safe. Do you remember what I told you about my tutor? When Mina nodded her head, he continued. The night after the results were sent to us, I went to talk to him about my quirk. And I tried to rationalize how I could utilize my quirk without What did you come up with? This was interesting. If it could help Izuku control his quirk, then she's all for helping. He asked me to mentally visualize the quirk. Replace it with something to represent me, and it. I said it was like an egg in a microwave. He blushed when he said how he thought about it. All Might was right. His explanation was rather plain. He says that I should visualize myself lowering the wattage, but I don't know how to control it. The two sat in silence, as they mulled over what Izuku had just explained to her. The way he explained his thought process for his quirk was hilariously plain, but Izuku seemed to be suffering enough, as it is today. She'd just tease him later, provided neither of them failed. This is a tough one. Mina tilted her head to the side, and closed her eyes. If you push it all into a part of your body, and release it, you'll break your limb, right? She looked over to Izuku, who nodded his head in acknowledgement. Yeah, the green-haired boy sighed, as he pulled his legs up to put his chin on his knees, and wrap his arms around his legs. What about focusing it into a smaller part of your body when you use it? Mina suggested with a shrug. Her suggestion got Izuku's attention, whose brain started whirling to think of a way to put that into a physical application. A smaller part? Yeah, like how I use my acid. Mina held up her hand, and let some droplets of non-lethal acid drip from it. I don't just release my acid randomly, like I used to a few times in the 3 weeks they had before going to U.A. She had told Izuku about a few incidents where her quirk had acted up when she was just growing into it, and how much clothes she had gone through. As a child I trained to be able to focus where I want to secrete it. From what I saw, your quirk is sort of similar. You choose which body part to enhance, then you let the villains have it. Chapeau. Seeing Mina punch an imaginary enemy made Izuku chuckle. How is it that every time he was feeling down, and in the dumps, this girl next to him knew just what to say or do to bring his spirits up? However, that thought had to take a backseat to the raging storm going on in his head. If putting all the power of One for All into his arm and hand left it in shambles, then what if he put it into a part of his body that he could afford to damage so that he could continue? Next up, Izuku. Midoriya Aizawa droned out, glancing at the green-haired boy step up to the circle. Izuku walked up to the circle with the same ball that Bakugo and half of the class had thrown by now. As he made his way to the middle of the circle, Izuku's brain kept whirling with its thoughts regarding his talk with Mina earlier. He had come up with an idea since then, but right now it was a gamble if it would even work. A gamble that could very well leave him with a mangled arm if he was wrong or miscalculated. Whenever you're ready, Midoriya Aizawa's voice breaks Izuku out of his thoughts. The scruffy-looking teacher looked bored, as he watched the green boy standing in the middle of the circle. You have a powerful quirk there. Midoriya Aizawa watched Midoriya wind up to throw. The minute he saw the same red veins running through Midoriya's arm, as the day of the exam, is when Aizawa loosened his capture tape and activated his quirk, which disabled Midoriya's "but I can't allow you to keep destroying your body every time you use it." Izuku felt One for All coursing through his arm, as he was about to let the ball fly. The idea he had was too risky to take if he didn't want to be last in this exam and be expelled. So the only idea he had was to get a high enough score in this part to not land him in last place. That idea had him trying to use One for All like he did in the exam. Trying is all he could accomplish, because the minute he let go of the ball it flew from his hand at a normal distance, which was pretty far for someone without his quirk, or any physical enhancement quirk at all. What happened? Izuku looked down at his hands in shock. That shock was short-lived when tape was wrapped around his body and pulled him towards Aizawa, whose hair stood up. His glowing red eyes glared at the captured boy. I erased your quirk. The pro hero spoke. Were you going to pull the same stunt you did in the exam, huh? Izuku looked at Aizawa and noticed the yellow goggles around his neck. Wait, you're the hero that can erase quirks? Erase your head. Don't dodge the question. Midoriya. The capture tape tightened around Izuku. Do you always intend to be nothing but a glass cannon? Only able to throw one punch or kick before breaking yourself? Do you know what happens to heroes like that out in the field? They get killed or the villain escapes. Worse of all, you put innocent people's lives at risk. Aizawa released the boy, who fell down, and stared up at the pro with wide eyes. Sorry Midoriya, with your type of power you can never be a hero. I gave you your impractical quirk back. Go, break yourself, and prove me right. The older man turned around, and walked further away from the downed boy, who looked down at the ground beneath him. Mina tried to go and help Izuku up, but Aizawa held up his hand to stop the girl. She looked up to him with confused eyes. Leave him. He needs to learn that others won't always be there to help him. But Mina tried to plead her case, but Aizawa's glare made her back down. Yes, sir. Her fists tightened in frustration. She wanted to do something, anything, to help her friend, but what could she do? Everything was on Izuku now. That didn't mean that she just had to quietly watch from the sidelines though. You can do it, Midori. The class turned to Mina in surprise. She had her hands over her mouth to project her voice to the boy, who had gotten up at some point, and was making his way to the circle. A serious look was on her face, as she shouted her encouragement to her curly-haired buddy. Show him that he's wrong. Show him that you can do it. Show him who's boss. Midoriya. Mina looked to Hagakure standing next to her, who had also started shouting encouragement to the boy now standing in the middle of the circle with his back to them. You can do it, Midoriya. Even Ida started shouting, with Uraraka throwing her hands up alongside him with an excited look on her face. Go for it! Show him your powerful quirk, she cheered. Shut the fuck up! Everyone that was cheering, even those who weren't, jumped in surprise at the anger-filled voice drowning them out. Bakugo glared at the people that had started shouting nonsense. What the hell were they saying? Deku? A quirk? No way. And he, smash! Everyone turned towards Izuku just in time to see the ball fly from his grip. The minute it left the safety of his hand, the ball shot off like a rocket towards the sky, flying faster and farther than anyone else's attempt at pitching, sans Uraraka's distance of infinity. Before they could say anything though, a dust cloud blew at them with a sonic boom to accompany it, making them close their eyes and cover their ears. Mr. Aizawa. When the cloud settled, they all saw Izuku standing there with his hand clenched in a fist, staring at Aizawa with a wobbly grin on his face, and tears threatening to fall from his eyes. Unlike when he used his quirk before, the only thing looking broken was his index finger. I'm still standing. After being berated by Aizawa, Izuku had started to quietly make his way to the circle. As he walked, he heard that voice in the back of his head that kept telling him his whole life couldn't do it. That no matter what quirk he had, he was still nothing. Useless Izuku, a Deku. You can do it, Midori! A shout silenced the voice in his head. Like a light had been switched on, the dark thoughts started fading away again to focus on the person shouting to him. Show him that he's wrong. Show him that you can do it. Izuku stood in the circle again, looking down at the ball in his hand. All the encouraging shouts from other people started filling the boy with hope again. He would do it. He would show Aizawa that he deserved to be here, that maybe he might not have a proper grasp on it right now, but that he would work even harder than everybody else to reign in One for All, and be just like All Might. What about focusing it into a smaller part of your body when you use it? Thanks, Mina. Izuku smiled to himself. Why did he doubt her advice in the first place? She hasn't been wrong yet. Pulling his arm back, Izuku started to focus all of One for All into one part of his body. One part that would not make him a burden. He brought the ball overhead, and started channeling the overwhelming power of One for All into the tip of his index finger. With the encouraging words from his friend and classmates, Izuku let the ball fly from his grip. Smash! The harsh wind that blew past Izuku when the ball flew into the sky didn't faze him. He was more focused on the fact that he had done it. He had shown Mr. Aizawa that I'm still standing. Aizawa looked down at the device in his hand, and raised his eyebrows in surprise. He held it up so that everyone else could see. 707 meters. They all shouted in surprise. Everyone that didn't know what the boy was capable of had written him off. Through all other assessments, Izuku displayed no type of quirk, and therefore got overshadowed by those that did. So to see this unassuming person pitch the ball that far surprised them. None more than Mina, who was shocked when Izuku's hand and arm wasn't broken. He did it, she thought, staring at Izuku, as Hagakure, Ida, and Uraraka cheered for finally seeing Izuku use his awesome quirk, as Uraraka put it. As they cheered, Mina finally noticed the blackened finger that Izuku had. He might have escaped destroying his whole arm, but he wasn't completely free from harm, it seemed. Before she could go and see if he was alright, an explosion went off close to where she was standing, making the girl fall back. DKU, you bastard! Shouted Bakugo, as he raced towards Izuku with explosions going off in his curled hands. How did you get that power? Izuku froze like a deer that jumped in front of a moving car, as he watched his bully run towards him, ready to beat the answers for his sudden quirk out of him. Before he could defend himself or Bakugo could even try to attack him, Aizawa's capture tape scarf stretched out and wrapped around the charging blonde, stopping him in his tracks. Stand down. Don't make me use my quirk any more than I have to, Aizawa grumbled, as he glared at Bakugo. It gives me serious dry eye. Too bad. That's an amazing quirk, the class thought. Bakugo, this is the second time you've tried to attack a student here. Do it one more time, and I'm sending you to the principal's office. Do I make myself clear? The only response he got from the boy was a growl. He tightened the tape around Bakugo. Do I make myself clear? Fucking yes! Bakugo shouted. Get this thing off me. Good. Aizawa let the tape retreat away from the angry teen. It's too early in the morning to have to deal with this. He turned away, as he put eye drops in his eyes. As Aizawa turned away, Mina had made her way over to her green-haired friend, who was still staring at Bakugo, who was glaring right back at the trembling boy. Are you okay, Midori? Mina asked the minute she made it to Izuku. Yeah. Izuku nodded his head, not once breaking eye contact with the fuming blonde a few steps away from him. Forgetting him, Mina grabbed his wrist and pulled him away from Bakugo, whose eyes followed the two with a piercing glare. Izuku couldn't really use One for All during the sit-ups and the seated toe touches, since that just required physical fitness. What those assessments did accomplish was Mina endlessly teasing the boy while she did her sit-ups, since he was holding her legs. The long-distance run should have at least netted Izuku some points, but the pain from his mangled finger kept making him stop to focus on trying not to cry out in pain. Since Aizawa forbade him from going to get his finger fixed because, as he said, it would take too much time, he was stuck in this constant limbo of pain. Now all of them stood in front of Aizawa, who had projected the ranks of Class 1A. Izuku had closed his eyes the minute the names came up. After taking a minute to mentally prepare himself for whatever he saw, Izuku opened his eyes and searched for his name. After scanning the first column, Izuku didn't see his name, not that he expected to come anywhere close to first, or even 10th for that matter. He held out hope that maybe he scored enough to not be last. That hope was shot the minute he saw he wasn't just close to last, he was last. That's it. Then Izuku felt the world around him go silent, as he stared up at the list of names. He didn't even register someone, probably Mina, putting their hand on his back, and rubbing it in comfort. I'm expelled, I failed. No one's going home. It was all a rational ruse that broke the silence though. Aizawa smirked at the look of surprise from the class when humans are faced with a situation where there's a lot more on the line than simply failing. That is when their true potential is realized. So the only way you would have actually been expelled would have been if you showed little to no potential. His gaze gazed over all of them, lingering on Midoriya for a second before he closed them. Now go get changed, and meet me in class. He surprised you, as well, didn't he? Aizawa looked over to the side, as he walked away from his students. Standing behind a corner was the hulking form of All Might, who still had his bright smile, only this time it was bigger than normal. I've read your files. Last year you expelled a whole class of freshmen. You were going to be expelled last place, weren't you? Since it was young Midoriya you didn't because you see the same potential in him that I do, am I right? I don't know what you're talking about. All Might only chuckled at Aizawa's response. He didn't get 0 points, so I didn't expel him. Had he scored nothing I would have sent him packing the minute he got back to class. The black-haired man started walking away. And isn't it a little early to be playing favorites? It almost seemed like you were in his corner the whole time. All Might faltered at Aizawa's last comment. Aizawa walked on, leaving All Might by himself. The number 1 hero glanced around the corner again, and watched Midoriya walking away with Ishido, Uraraka, and Ida joining him. All three were talking to the boy, and by the blush with spastic movements the man assumed they were complimenting him. He's going to be a great hero someday. All Might couldn't help but feel proud for his apprentice, and with someone like young Ishido helping him, he could get there sooner. All Might had been there when the two were talking about Midoriya's quirk. He had hid behind the corner of the building the two were sitting close to. He was glad that she helped him figure out how to minimize the damage from the backlash of One for All. A powerful quirk, and great friends. All Might started walking away. You'll surpass me one day. I'm sure of it. After getting healed by Recovery Girl, Izuku had gone back to class to get the syllabus and fetch his bag, after getting changed out of his gym clothes. When he returned to class he found Mina waiting for him. Now the two of them were walking out of the school gate together. Dude, that was so awesome. Mina gushed about Izuku's display earlier. You were all like WOSH. And boom, that ball went flying so far. She made hand motions to accompany each sound effect. I still ranked last though. Izuku was happy that Mina thought his display was good, but it didn't help him in the end. He was still at the bottom of the list in Class 1A. So? Mina shrugged her shoulders. You know the saying, when you hit rock bottom then there's nowhere to go. But up she threw her fist in the air with a grin. So let's aim for the top together, okay? Izuku smiled at Mina's enthusiasm. Her bubbly personality always cheered him up when he fell down, which reminded him. Mina the pink girl looked up at him with a tilt of her head. Thanks, if it wasn't for you I probably would have broken more than my finger. He scratched his cheek with a blush. No need to thank me, Midori. Mina grinned, giving him a friendly punch in the shoulder. You're one of the smartest people I know. You'd probably have figured it out yourself. Besides, we're curly hair buddies. Oh, Izuku couldn't help but smile at that weight curly hair. Hello Midoriya-san, Ishido-san. The two looked back to see Ida standing behind them with his hand up in a greeting. Do you mind if I walk with you too? I assume you're on your way to the station. Hey Ida. Mina smiled at the tall teen. Since the morning he had shown that he was sorry for his harsh treatment of them on the day of the entrance exam. So he wasn't a giant douche to Mina anymore. No, there's someone else who's taken that spot now. Mr. Explosive Temper. Oh. Hey Izuku greeted was a waving of his right hand. Is your finger alright? Ida asked in concern, which Izuku quickly waved off with a grateful smile on his face. It's fine, he smiled. Recovery Girl used her quirk to help heal it. I should be fine by tomorrow. He said that she gave him a kiss to help his boo-boo. Mina puckered his lips and made exaggerated kissing sounds, making Izuku blush up a storm. She giggled when the boy started to do his embarrassed dance, which consisted of him waving his hands back and forth and shaking his head. Hey! The three turned towards the way Ida had just come from to see Uraraka running towards them. Wait up, you three! She was waving her hand back and forth. Uraraka! Mina waved to the brown-haired girl who stopped in front of them with a bright smile on her face. Hey Ashido, she greeted, then turned to the two boys. Let me see here, you're Tenya Ida, right? The bespectacled boy nodded his head. And you're Deku Midoriya? Izuku flinched at Uraraka, calling him that. Actually Uraraka, Deku's what that guy, Bakugo, called him. Mina explained for Izuku. She didn't like the name. The way Bakugo said it obviously wasn't in a playful nickname sort of way. Yeah, Deku is what calls me. As an insult, Izuku explained with his face blushing up a storm. You'd think that being friends with Mina, and having to be the target of her playful teasing would make him better with other girls. But unfortunately that wasn't the case. My name's Izuku Midoriya. I'm starting to dislike this guy more and more. Mina puffed out her cheeks in annoyance. Well, I wouldn't go as far as to say that I dislike the guy. We all have to learn to get along to become heroes in the future. It is very unsportsmanlike though. Ida nodded his head in agreement. Oh, I'm sorry. Uraraka reached forward and held Izuku's hands in hers with her pinkies off so that she didn't accidentally activate her quirk. But you know what? I like the name Deku. It will make a great hero name. It sounds like Dekairu, and it also sounds kind of cute. You may call me Deku. Uraraka, holding his hands and calling him cute, kind of, was too much for the freckled boy, whose brain short-circuited, and yelled out the first thing that came to mind. Huh! Ida! And Mina gaped at Izuku, who covered his face with the hands that Uraraka had let go. Didn't you just say it was an insult? Asked a confused Ida. Mina nodded her head next to him. It's a paradigm shift. My whole world is upside down. Izuku screamed into his hands. Mina was confused. How could Izuku agree to have someone calling him such a horrible nickname? She did agree with Uraraka on the fact that it sounded like Dekairu, and in that context it would have sounded cute, but the fact that Bakugo calls him that, as an insult, leaves a bad taste in her mouth just having to even utter the word. Hold on a moment. Mina looked closer at Izuku's blushing face, and almost squealed out loud, oh my gosh. No way. Is Midori in love? She gave her trademark Ashido grin, though she might be a bit off there if she heard the thoughts running through Izuku's head. Why do I keep getting flustered for every girl that talks to me? Love was far from his thoughts right now. One of the many things that you had to give Udada credit for was the fact that they don't do things half-assed when it came to the education of their students. It might be a course where they train the next generation of heroes, but they couldn't send them out into the world with a meager education. This is why they had their learners learning things like English, maths, and even art to make sure that they don't end up as mindless meatheads in the field. This was probably the one thing about the hero course that Mina Ashido did not understand. She had come to the Udade to escape needless things like maths and English, and just be allowed to freely use her quirk to be the best damn hero ever. When was she going to test the meaning of a verb against a villain? Who the hell was she fighting for that to be a way of beating someone? English man, the villain who confuses Japanese people with his English sentences. President Mike begged to differ with her assessment of English. He enthusiastically shouted grammar rules, when almost everyone looked about half dead during class, and it was only their first day. Throughout the day Mina felt her brain slowly shut down, and blocked the teacher's spiel about each subject. Most of them didn't even ease the kids into their subjects. They almost leapt right in with classes. The only class that Mina enjoyed was the Modern Hero Art History class, and that was only because Midnight gave them a practical assignment to start them off. So when the bell rang for lunch, Mina was one of the students who had almost leapt out of the class with so much gusto. Following behind her was the other guy who also seemed like he was trying to keep himself from dozing off through each lesson that day. Arif, clang. Izuku looked up from his food to see that his lunch partner had let her head slam onto the table just enough to not give her serious brain or head damage. However, it was loud enough to get his attention. Are you okay, Mina? He asked. Whyy, Mina whined, as she looked across the table at Izuku with a forlorn look on her face. Why must we suffer through so many difficult or boring subjects? Didn't we come here to be heroes? She puffed out her cheeks in mock anger, which made Izuku chuckle. When it came to schoolwork, it was readily apparent that Mina and Izuku were in leagues of their own. While Izuku excelled in it, Mina just barely scraped by. Whereas in a practical sense, Izuku wouldn't really want to fight Mina. She was athletic, and had a good grasp on her quirk. Izuku, on the other hand, was still figuring out his quirk. It would be a case of who had the more experience. There was also the fact that her quirk could melt the skin off his bones, though he doubted she would go that far to fight someone. When am I ever gonna have to use a hypotenuse to fight a villain? She was referring to the maths class that they just had with ectoplasm. The clone quirk user had seen it fit to give his students a test to gauge where their strengths lie. Afterwards he had had a lesson on trigonometry because that was the one thing that some students seemed to have struggled with. Hypotenuse. Izuku corrected his pink friend, who only let out a groan of frustration. It's not so bad. That's because you're smart, Midori. Mina sighed, As she sat up, I wish I was as smart as you. Izuku scratched the back of head with a blush on his face. Being complimented was still something that he was getting used to. Being berated the majority of your life makes it difficult to get used to people suddenly telling you that you are doing great. At least he's getting better at it. He was broken from his musings by someone grabbing his hands. Mina had reached over the table and took his hands into hers, causing a fierce blush to spread over the boy's face. Midori Thigh Mini gave Izuku puppy dog eyes. Won't you help me with my homework and stuff? Please, we can have one-on-one sessions. Gah! Izuku pulled his hands back to cover his flushed face. He wasn't ignorant to what Mina was trying to insinuate, and that made some rather saucy images come to mind. Mina, said girl, just laughed at Izuku's reaction. She needed that after all that information being shoved into her brain by their pro-hero teachers. So far Class 1A had only had one physical class that had them using their quirks, and that was only yesterday. Mina was looking forward to the afternoon classes where they would be having the one class that she even joined U.A for, Hero Basic Training. Hey Midori, thinking about yesterday's quirk assessments brought a few thoughts that Mina had. Can I ask you something? Izuku took his hands away from his face after having calmed down. Go ahead, he said, picking up his chopsticks to continue eating. What's that Bakugo guy's problem with you? Izuku dropped his chopsticks. What are you talking about? Izuku chuckled nervously, as he tried to avoid eye contact with Mina, who raised a brow at his odd reaction. There's nothing going on between me and Kaken. If I was in the right mood I'd tease you about how that made you sound like you had a crush on the guy, Mina said. But seriously, Bakugo looked like he wanted to murder you. He was annoyed at me for, quote, stealing first place from him. But after you threw that ball the guy sounded like he wanted to skin you alive. This was something Izuku just wanted to keep in the past. How he and Kaken interacted before U.A would be better if it remained out of the public eye. He had assumed that his former childhood friend would have also come to that conclusion, if Aizawa's threat was anything to go by. Kaken wanted to be a hero just as bad as Izuku, and he wouldn't risk it just to act like he did back in junior high. The one-for-all inheritor was sure of that. You okay, Midori? Izuku blinked when Mina's concerned voice reached his ears. The girl was staring at him with equally concerned eyes. Yeah, Kaken is a bit extreme. He ignored Mina's snort of derision, and continued, but he's good guy at heart. Sorry Midori, you're a nice guy, and I know you wouldn't lie to me, but I can't see that being true. Mina glanced over to the other side of the cafeteria where the subject of their conversation was sitting at a table by himself. When the aggressive blonde looked at them, and caught Mina glaring at him, he flipped her off, a gesture which Mina gave back in kind. Yeah, she really didn't like that guy. Achiko Uraraka came from a poor household. Her parents' situation wasn't the best when it came to money, and Uraraka wanted to do everything in her power to make life better for the two people who raised her. Eventually she became someone who others would call stingy, not that she let that bother her. Growing up in borderline poverty tends to make you treasure everything you have, and try not to look for more expensive things to satisfy that ugly monster called want. So she was extremely happy that the food at U.A wasn't only cheap, but hella good, as well. Food, delicious food, get into my belly soon, Uraraka sang, as she skipped away from the cafeteria line with her food in hand. The girl stopped momentarily to find a place to sit, preferably a place where her new friends were sitting or even some people from her class. As Uraraka scanned the cafeteria, the girl's eyes landed on two of her new friends sitting at a table talking to one another. Ida had said that he wanted to make plans for his schoolwork, and stayed in class for lunch. She smiled, and started making her way over to the two, who hadn't noticed her yet. Uraraka was stopped by someone grabbing her wrist, and pulling her into a seat at another table. Luckily the brown-haired girl was well versed in I have to hold on to this food or I don't eat martial food arts. What the she was silenced by a hand being put over her mouth. Well, she assumed that was what was being put over her mouth because it definitely felt like a hand, but she couldn't see it. SHHHHH. The person the invisible hand belonged to shushed her. Magukura? Hagakure took her hand away from Uraraka's mouth when she was sure the girl wasn't about to blow her cover. What are you doing? Look, the invisible girl turned in her seat, and poked her head over the dividing small wall between each table. Uraraka also turned in her seat to see what Hagakure was looking at, but couldn't tell what exactly that was. What am I looking at? She asked. Not what? Who? Hagakure sounded more excited, almost on the verge of squealing in delight. I'm talking about Ashido, and Midoriya. Ashido, and Dekukuin? Uraraka tilted her head in confusion. She looked over to her two friends, sitting a few tables away from the two girls, talking about one thing or another. Ashido seemed to be complaining about something to their green-haired friend. What about them? You don't see it? Hagakure seemed shocked, as her uniform turned towards the girl next to her. No? Uraraka was getting more confused. Was something going on between Ashido and Dekukuin? They would be so cute, as a couple, Hagakure gushed, as she put her hands together and sighed dreamily. She looked back to where the subjects of their conversation were sitting, and let out a gasp of delight. Look, look, there! Proof! She patted Uraraka on the arm. At some point Ishido had reached over and grabbed Midoriya's hands, which made the boy go a new shade of red and cover his face in embarrassment, in turn making Ishido laugh her head off. But isn't Deku-kun always shy? Uraraka turned in her seat to eat her food. Gossip wasn't her favorite pastime, but if it was harmless then she'd be okay with participating. But this is different. Hagakure also turned in her seat to continue eating. Ever since they got here they've been attached at the hip. And you can't say that you don't also see it. Uraraka paused while eating to think about that. The interactions between Ishido and Midoriya mostly consisted of Ishido playfully teasing the green-haired boy, who would become a nervous blushing tomato. It was apparent to anyone who has seen and or spoken to Midoriya knows that the boy was horribly shy. On the other hand, Ishido was someone who had no problem speaking her mind and, whether she wanted to be or not, was made for the limelight. Besides the differing personality types, the two were able to converse with one another and seemed to generally enjoy one another's company. Talking to them after school yesterday, where Ishido had dragged all of them to McDonald's to have some after-school food to get to know one another, had helped Uraraka to better understand her new friends. It is a surprise that they were such good friends, but it would be cute to see them get together, since Ishido is so energetic, and Deku-kun is so withdrawn. But she cut off Hagakure's cheer. We can't just force them to get together. We don't even know what their feels are towards each other. You're no fun. Hagakure sounded like she was pouting. I think they're cute together, and I fully support the IzuMina relationship. What are you two talking about? The two girls looked over to the end of their table to see that they weren't the only ones sitting there. Sitting at the end of the table was a purple-haired girl who had earlobes that extended into earphone jacks. It seemed like she had been there for a while if her half-eaten food was anything to go by. Oh hey, you're in our class? Hagakure stroked her invisible chin with her invisible hand. Kyoko Jiro, the girl introduced herself. Nice to meet you. I'm Tura Hagakure, the invisible girl waving at the other girl. I'm Ochako Uraraka. Uraraka smiled to answer your earlier question. Hagakure was talking about how she thinks that Midoriya and Ishido would make a good couple. It's true. Hagakure shook her sleeve up and down of everyone in the class. Midoriya seems to be the most comfortable with Ishido. And did you hear what they call each other? She calls him Midori, and he calls her Mina. Something has got to be going on there. Jiro turned in her seat to look at the two, who seemed to be in a deep conversation with one another now. After watching them for a few seconds, she turned back in her seat. They just seem like good friends to me. Jiro shrugged her shoulders, ignoring Hagakure's "why doesn't anyone see it" moan. I mean, we've only been in a class for one day. Midoriya seems like a good guy, and Ishido is a friendly person, but I can't say if they should be a couple or not. Get back to me about that in a few months. Come on guys. Hagakure lightly hit the table. Why are you so dead set on them becoming an item? What makes you think that they would be good together? The purple-haired girl slid closer to the two. You don't even know them properly. I'm also curious about Uraraka. Woman's intuition. Hagakure put her hands on her hips and pushed her chest out. When she saw the two giving her deadpan stares, the invisible girl seemed to deflate slightly and tried to plead her case. I'm right about this. Watch. In a few months the two of them will be dating. Oh? Want a bet? A glint came to Jiro's eyes. You're on. Hagakure held her arm up. The two other girls assumed that she was making a fist. Guys, I don't think this is a good idea. Uraraka's sweat dropped. What exactly did she get dragged into? Stakes and rules? Jiro ignored Uraraka, and Hagakure seemed to be doing the same. I bet they will get together within this year. The invisible girl stated. We're not allowed to influence either of them so that one of us can win the bet. How much are you willing to bet? I bet they remain friends till we finish U.A, and nothing happens between them. In fact, I bet one of them ends up with someone else. How does 1,000 yen sound? Jiro reached forward with her hand outstretched. She felt Hagakure grip her hand, and the two shook. Deal. The two turned to Uraraka, who blinked in surprise at being the focus of attention all of a sudden. You want in on this, Uraraka? Hagakure offered. No. I'm fine, the girl nervously chuckled. Putting money on the line for something like a bet was something she did not want to be a part of. Come on, Uraraka. It's just a harmless bet. Jiro shrugged her shoulders. Besides, if you win, which I am going to, then you'll be 2,000 yen richer. Excuse me? But it's obvious that I'm going to win. Hagakure crossed her arms over her chest. So if you want to win, then take my side and board the IzuMina ship. No, I'm going to win. Midoriya seems too timid to go through with a relationship, Jiro rebutted. Uraraka looked between the two with conflicting emotions running through her head. She'd never been in a situation when she needed to bet. She just knew that nothing good could come from betting. The old man that lived a few houses down from where Uraraka's house was, as a child, had a horrible gambling addiction. It did not work out for him in the end. So to the borderline penny-pinching girl, putting money in this bet didn't seem right. However, the chance of getting more money did sound appealing. Do it! You know you wanna. Won the girl's right shoulder, and Uraraka with a devil's costume stood and poked her with its elbow. No! You mustn't! Think of what you'll lose if you do lose this bet. An angel Uraraka now stood on her left shoulder with her hands clasped in prayer. Don't listen to that pansy. Just think of all the money you'll make if you do win. Devil Uraraka started chuckling evilly. Don't do. How about Uraraka? Hagakure's voice made the two inner demons vanish. Uraraka could feel the pressure of the two stars on her person, and closed her eyes before making her decision. Ashido the pink and green duo turned their attention to the person who was approaching their table. He was a spiky red-haired teen with sharp teeth and a wide grin. Kirishima? Mina blinked in surprise. When the red-haired guy nodded, she got out of her seat and started inspecting the boy with a wide-eyed look. Dude, I'm digging the new look. She noticed two particular tufts of spikes that look like horns. Are you trying to be like me here? Mina reached up and poked the boy's hair horns, making him swat her hand away. I didn't think it would come out like that. Honestly, Kirishima chuckled. Dude, we should call ourselves horn buddies. Mina grinned as she pointed at her horns. You're my horn buddy, and Midori is my curly-haired buddy. She motioned to the boy sitting at the table. Kirishima turned his attention to Izuku, who nervously waved at him. Kirishima's eyes widened for a brief second before a grin spread across his face. Hey, you're Midoriya, right? The guy who broke his finger to win the ball toss. Izuku nodded his head, and that seemed to make the grin on Kirishima's face bigger. Dude, that was so manly. Manly? His wording of the situation seemed to confuse the green-haired boy. Yeah man, the red-haired teen sat in the seat next to Midoriya. You threw that ball straight out of the park. You even made a sonic boom with the power of your quirk. Super manly. Kirishima held up his one arm and cupped his bicep. Oh, it was nothing. Izuku looked away with a small embarrassed smile. Come on man. Get more excited. You have such an amazing quirk. It makes mine seem weaker in comparison. Your quirk? Now Izuku's eyes seemed to widen this time. Here we go. Mina rolled her eyes with a smile on her face as she took her seat again. Yeah man. Kirishima held up his hand, and before Izuku's eyes it turned into a sharp rock version of his hand before going back to normal. It's called hardening. So I can harden any part of my body just like I did right now. Izuku's brain started whirling to life at being presented with a new quirk. If he can harden any part of his body, then it's like a transformation quirk. If it makes his body parts harder, how much damage can he endure before it starts actually taking an effect? What's the sharpest he can make? Is he okay? Kirishima turned to Mina, who didn't seem fazed by the spectacle in front of her. Don't worry, this happens often. Mina wasn't new to the patented Izuku Midoriya mumbling spree. In fact, I learned a little trick to snap him back to reality when the pink girl got out of her seat and slid into the seat on Izuku's other side. Kirishima watched as Mina leaned closer to the mumbling Izuku, who didn't seem to notice that she even sat in the seat next to him. He was surprised when Mina put her lips next to Izuku's ear and whispered something before blowing on his ear. A shiver ran down Izuku's spine when Mina's words and her blowing on his ear reached his brain. He held his ear and turned his head towards the girl sitting on his right. He opened and closed his mouth trying to form words. A bright blush seemed to be spreading across his face. Welcome back to planet Earth, Midori. Mina giggled. Mina, what? Why did you do that? Do what? You know what? Please do not explain it to me. What happened? Mina tilted her head to the side with a taunting grin. Izuku tried to form some sentences as to what happened, but the only sound that came out of his mouth sounded like an injured animal. Laughter reminded them that there was another person sitting at their table. Ahahaha, that was good. Kirishima held his stomach as he laughed. Has she been teasing you relentlessly, Midoriya? Kind of. Izuku chuckled. But you love it. Mina patted the blushing boy's cheek, making the blush get darker. Kirishima watched the two with a grin on his face. He didn't really talk to Ashido much in junior high. In fact, he came here to thank her for inspiring him to take another look at himself. But when he saw Midoriya, he had to let the dude know how impressed he was with his display. He thought about bringing it up again, but decided against it when he saw the two bantering with one another, with Ashido being the one to do the bantering, and Midoriya overreacting. It almost seemed like he was intruding. Kirishima-san? The red-haired teen snapped out of his thoughts when he heard Izuku addressing him. Is it okay if I ask you a question? Sure man. Lay it on me. Did you style your hair after the hero Crimson Riot? The way Kirishima looked and acted had been ringing bells in Izuku's brain. It reminded him of a hero he had seen an interview of back in the day. You know Crimson Riot? Kirishima seemed to be at a loss for words. Most of the people he spoke to, a lot of them didn't know who the old school hero was. Yet here was a guy he doesn't even know asking him about his hero. He's a fairly old hero, but I liked his message in his one interview: as long as you have a manly spirit, it doesn't matter what kind of quirk you have. The grin on Kirishima's face threatened to spit his face in two with how wide it grew. Midoriya, you are the first person to actually know about Crimson Riot. He lightly punched the other boy on the shoulder, and felt the boy's muscles tense. And you seem like you work out as well. Wait, really? Mina blinked in surprise. Without warning, she grabbed Izuku's arm, and started squeezing. Damn, Midori. What have you got hidden under there? Izuku couldn't answer because he was trying not to pass out from all the heat in his face. I am here. Everybody in Class 1A sat up straight when they heard that voice coming through the door like a hey, who locked the door? You're ruining my entrance. The door rattled, as the number 1 hero tried to open it, but it stayed shut. The class heard a rattling of keys, and some mumbles of that's not the right one before finally it was pulled open. Though All Might's entrance was stopped by the lockdown, and it slightly lessened the impact he was probably going for, it didn't stop the class from getting excited to see the number 1 hero walking to the front. There were quite a few murmurs that started flying around the classroom, most of them excited that their favorite hero was teaching them. Hello class. I am here, as your teacher for the most important class in Udata High. Think of this class as Heroine 101, and for today we will be having ourselves a All Might struck a pose before reaching into his pocket, and turning to the class to show what he was now holding, which was a card that read Combat Training Class. Izuku could feel the intense aura coming from Bakugo sitting in front of him. Hopefully he avoided having to fight the blonde team. But before that, you all have to look at the part. All Might motioned to a wall in the class which opened up to reveal suitcases that had different numbers on it. Costumes. Most of the classes cheered. Now go get changed, and meet me at Training Ground Beta. Izuku adjusted his outfit slightly, as he made his way to the exit of the tunnel leading to Training Ground Beta. This was the one class that he was the most excited for, and the fact that he was being taught by his idol just made the class even better for him. As Izuku exited the tunnel, he saw that he was the last one to get changed, and made his way over to the rest of Class 1A. Unlike everyone else in the class, his costume wasn't made by clothing companies like them. No, his was made by his mother, and while some people would be embarrassed that their mother made their hero costume, Izuku wore his with pride. It was a symbol that his mom believed in him. Hey, Deku-kun! Izuku was glad for his mouth guard because it hid his blush from the approaching Uraraka and Mina. Midori, you look so cute, Mina gushed the minute the two made it to the boy who stood ramrod straight. The pink girl did a little pose for the boy with a grin on her face. So, what do you think? Mina was clad in a skin-tight bodysuit with purple and turquoise-colored camouflage pattern for a design which ended just above her breasts. It left little to the imagination of how a hem fit Mina was. Over this she wore a tan-colored waistcoat with white fur on the collar which she left unbuttoned. For footwear she wore violet and beige boots. Her dark eyes were accentuated with a white mask over her eyes. I should have been more specific about my costume. This suit is skin-tight. Uraraka was also wearing a skin-tight outfit. Her one was a black full bodysuit with a pale pink design going down the middle of her torso, and 2 black circles on her chest. On the shoulders were 2 more pink designs which were cut off by darker pink armbands, and a same-colored choker around her neck. Around her waist was a 2-piece belt with a circle embedded into the center. Her wrist guards were circular in design with pink handles on each one. For shoes she had on wide knee-high boots with magenta soles. Under her arm was a pink half-helmet that had a clear pink visor in the front. Even her outfit showed the curves that the zero-gravity user was sporting. You both look great. Izuku looked off to the side. Compared to the two of them, or anyone in the class, Izuku's costume wasn't as flashy. His costume was a green full-body jumpsuit that had white strips running up and down it with a red utility belt around his waist. He had on black elbow and knee pads, white gloves on his hands, and his signature red boots on his feet. With his mask on, 2 protrusions stuck out, giving him one of 2 looks. Either he looked like a version of All Might, or he looked like a green bunny. However, the respirator looking the way it does, you'd easily guess who he was trying to represent. Alright newbies. All Might's voice brought everyone's attention to the front again now for an explain. Excuse me sir, a person, wearing what could only be described as a white robot complete with helmet, and all spoke up. By the voice Izuku figured it to be Ida. This is one of the battlefields where we took our entrance examinations. Do you intend for us to take a similar exam? Not quite. All Might shook his head. You normally see heroes and villains fighting in the open whether you're watching the news or just wandering through town. But that's not the only place where battles can occur. Back alley deals, drug smuggling rings, hostage situations. Sometimes heroes have to fight in smaller locations like in buildings, underground or even alleyways. So I'm going to be splitting all of you up into smaller groups. All Might's explanation got cut short. Isn't this a bit much for the first day? Did you randomly choose people or where they were predetermined? Does my cape sparkle enough, or does it need some more flair? How much damage can we inflict on the other team before the match ends? Izuku shivered when Bakugo asked that. I wasn't done explaining. All Might's sweat dropped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Now everyone else had to sweat drop at seeing this hulking figure holding a small notebook while flipping through its pages. Aha, here we are. For this exercise you will all be split into groups of 2, then we will have one team be the heroes, and the other be the villains. The way the match is decided is either when the villains or heroes captures the other team, the heroes recover the fake weapon planted in the building, or the villains are successful in defending the device. Isn't it a bit weird to randomly put us in teams? Mina tilted her head in thought. Think about it, Mina. Not all heroes can choose who they team up with when they get on the scene, Izuku explained. Right you are. So without further ado, All Might pulled out a box that he held up high. Let's get to the teams. As All Might reached into the box, Mina turned to Izuku, who was readjusting his mask slightly. You know Midori? Team A is Izuku Midoriya. And, yes Mina? Your outfit kind of reminds me of All Might. Oh, does it? All Might paused in his rummaging to fully process what Mina had just said. He let go of the piece of paper he had been holding in shock. I knew it. The kid was being too obvious. Are you okay, All Might? Ida asked the number 1 hero, who shook his head to clear thoughts of having a talk with Izuku later about being more subtle. Not to worry, young Ida. All Might started rummaging again, and grabbed another slip of paper. The partner of Izuku Midoriya is Omake the One. Namuri Kiyama, better known as Midnight the 18 hero, was someone who loved art. It was both weird and appropriate to attach that interest to her. To be an artist, especially one that specializes in the human form, you have to have a good grasp on human proportions, and while Midnight would prefer to physically grasp some people's proportions, she does have a good understanding of it. In junior high, Midnight had been enthralled by the chance to get up close and personal with a naked model, and that's what led her to the art classes. When she found out that drawing someone in the nude was something art colleges did, she was heartbroken, but at that point she was already interested in art and its history. As her teacher had always said, the best way for you to understand art is to immerse yourself in it. Now that she was an art history teacher at U.A, she wanted to pass that love on to the next generation of possible art lovers. The problem being that many of these kids were too focused on the hero aspect of U.A, and didn't even attempt to understand art. So Midnight came up with a fun way to find out who had the talent, and the drive to be the next big hit in the art world. I thought we would be drawing naked ladies, a purple grape-haired midget shouted in despair. It was already established who was the pervert of 1A. Sorry dear, but U.A draws the lines at nude sketches. Believe me, I've tried. Midnight let out a forlorn sigh, as she cupped her one cheek. Currently Class 1A was participating in Midnight's fun way to get them in the swing of art history. Simply put, she had them get into pairs, and then each person in the pair would take turns to draw the person across from them. So far it has been going okay. A lot of the students seem to be enjoying it. Either they were enjoying seeing the horrible attempts they or their partners made at sketching the person in front of them, or they were genuinely interested in the subject enough to try their best. As Midnight had walked around the class, either giving out advice or complimenting those that were trying, there wasn't really anyone with good artistic talent that stood out to her. Wow! Midori! This is so good! An exclamation had gotten both Midnight's and the rest of the students' attention. Sitting closer to the back of the class was a blushing green-haired boy with a pink-haired girl sitting across from him holding a sketch pad in her hands with clear surprise on her face. Really? The boy chuckled as he twiddled his thumbs and bashfully looked down at the table in front of him. Let me see. A brown-haired girl that was sitting close to them glanced over to the sketch pad, and her face now also had a look of surprise. Deku, this is awesome. I didn't know you knew how to draw. Midnight was there in an instant, and plucked the sketch pad from the pink-haired girl's hands to scan over the sketch that the two girls were praising. When she saw it, Midnight had to say that the praise was well placed. The boy had made an almost perfect sketch of the pink girl. Obviously there were parts that were a bit rough, and some proportions were slightly off, but overall it was a well-drawn picture. Did you draw this, Midoriya? Midnight turned her intense look onto the boy, who started sweating at the heated gaze. Yes? Till the day she kicked the bucket, Midnight would swear that she heard a choir of angels singing, and saw a bright light shining down on the green-haired boy. Yes, you are the one. You'd swear stars were shining in Midnight's eyes. We are going to cultivate this talent. This was the year that Midnight finally found someone to pass her knowledge and skills onto. Art-wise, one-on-one lessons would be required, and she subconsciously licked her lips at that thought, which had the effect of scaring the teens sitting in front of her. Do I need an adult? I am an adult. Oh yes, this year would be fun for the art history teacher. Never once in his life had Izuku Midoriya ever entertained the thought of becoming a villain. He was steadfast in his determination to become a hero to protect those that couldn't protect themselves. What a twist of fate it was that he was now tasked with playing the villain on his first official day at the #1 hero school in Japan known as UA. It's like the heavens were trying to either deter his faith in heroism, or they were testing said faith. What made the situation even worse was that the last person he wanted to face was on the hero team. "Are you alright, Midoriya?" He felt his faux villain partner place their hand on his shoulder. Izuku let out a shaky breath as he turned away from the fake bomb his team was tasked to defend. He had to raise his head to give his attention to his partner. Just thinking is all. Mizo Shoji gazed down at his partner with concern shimmering in his eyes. Shoji was a very tall muscular young man that had pale gray hair that was swept forward to cover most of his face at a downward angle. His lower face was covered by a blue mask. His most defining feature was his 6 arms with skin that attached all of them. For a hero costume he wore a tight blue tank top. 6 white markings that looked like eyes decorated it like a dice. He had a belt on that had an eye-shaped belt buckle that kept up his slightly baggy trousers that matched his shirt. For footwear he had on indigo boots. Shoji was sure that Midoriya was concerned with more than just the test that they were taking. It was painfully obvious that his partner shared a connection with the hero team, and it was bothering him. "We have a few minutes before we start." Shoji sat down on one of the smaller crates in the room. "Want to talk about it?" Midoriya looked off to the side and rubbed his thumb over the side of his curled index finger. They should be talking about strategies, and how to protect the fake bomb. He knew this, but, "It's Kakanai mean Bakugo." Midoriya rubbed his arm. "You have history, right?" Shoji tilted his head to the side, as the mouth on his hand spoke. "Considering Bakugo's attitude, it's not a nice one." Izuku didn't answer, but the tight grip he had on his sleeve was all Shoji needed to see to know that he was right. "Kakan is everything that I'm not. He has the strength, the confidence, and the ambition to be great. Even his quirk is amazing." Izuku looked down at his hand which he clenched into a fist. "Compared him I've always felt subpar. But that's all the more reason for me to do better." Izuku reached up and put his mask on. "I refuse to lose today." It was obvious that Shoji's partner had some demons, and he was trying to fight them. The most physical demon he had was standing outside the building preparing to enter and claim victory. "Well, if you're so determined to win then I can't drag you down, can I?" Shoji's hand and mouth grinned. "I didn't mean to get you wrapped up in my fight. We're teammates." Midoriya Shoji stood up. "Whether I wanted to or not, I'm along for the ride. So let's do our best to win." He put out one of his multiple hands. Right. Izuku smiled behind his mouth guard and shook the taller teen's hand. "Hey, shitty hair." Kirishima had been adjusting his gear-shaped shoulder pad when Bakugo spoke up. Well, he didn't agree with the nickname the blonde decided to give him. He wasn't about to antagonize him. "It's Kirishima." But whatever didn't mean that he wouldn't correct him. "Do you think Deku actually has a quirk?" Kirishima could see that Bakugo was shaking. If it were anyone else he'd be trying to figure out what they were shaking off. This guy though, it was obvious that he was shaking with rage. "Deku, oh, you mean Midoriya?" Kirishima sat down on the railing that was outside the building they would be entering to begin their battle exercise. "Well, I mean the dude did show us he had won when he threw the ball, and Ishio seems to think so, as well. They have been friends for." "Shitty raccoon eyes know nothing," Bakugo shouted, making his faux hero partner jump in surprise. "That fucking nerd has been weak and useless since we were kids. Now he suddenly has a powerful quirk?" The blonde gritted his teeth in anger. "What's your problem with Midoriya anyway?" The red-haired teen froze when Bakugo turned his glare onto him. "My problem with Deku is that he's fucking beneath me. He's probably had that quirk all along, and he's been laughing at me behind my back." Small explosions went off in his hands. "Well, I'm gonna show that nerd who's #1. I'll show him that I'm the fucking best." Kirishima watched silently as his partner glared at the building like he was trying to set it ablaze. He could tell that if need be he'd try to keep Bakugo from outright killing Midoriya. But he wouldn't go that far, right? After All Might gave them the signal to enter the building, Bakugo lifted his one hand and blasted the front door off of its hinges. "Dude, what the hell?" Kirishima gaped at him. "They fucking know that we're gonna be coming in." Bakugo wasted no time in crossing the threshold of the building's front door. "We could have snuck in and quietly searched for the bomb." Kirishima followed behind Bakugo. As they walked further in the building, "You just gave away our position. What if they try to stop us? What can Deku and that stupid octopus do?" Bakugo laughed. "I'll just use my quirk to blow them up." Kirishima looked at his teammate in confusion. If he didn't know any better, he was sure that Bakugo was trying to pick a fight, like he didn't even care about the exercise. Of course he is. The redhead sweat dropped. This is the same guy who tried to use his quirk on 2 of his classmates on the first day. When they turned the first corner, Kirishima decided to speak up about something that was on his mind since the 2 of them entered the building. "So what's the plan?" He looked at the Bakugo who was walking in front of him. "Plan? Yeah? He raised his brow at the sound of confusion mixed with disregard in which Bakugo's response was spoken. A plan to win. I'm going to beat stupid Deku to a bloody pulp, Bakugo answered. Then I'm going to making him squeal about the bomb's location. And win this fucking thing. Okay, Kirishima pinched the bridge of his nose, and closed his eyes in growing annoyance. Your brutal explanation aside, what about Shoji? What are we going to do about him? Who? Shoji. You know the only other person on Midoriya's team. Was this guy just bad with names, or did he just not care? The octopus? Asterisk tisk asterisk. Bakugo scoffed. I'll give him the same treatment Deku's gonna get. That will show him, and everyone, what happens when you side with that loser. Kirishima felt his eyes twitch. As the two spoke, they didn't see the shadow that was sneaking up behind them until it wrapped itself around Kirishima. What the hell? Kirishima activated his quirk on reflex, and felt the shadow quickly let go of him. The hero team turned around to see who had tried to blindside them, and came face to face with the person that they were just talking about. Shoji had his hands up in fists, as he stared at the two. The front of his costume had some small tears where it got caught on Kirishima's quirk. In 2 of his 6 hands was the white tape that All Might had given them to tie around their opponents. A sneak attack? Kirishima held up his hardened arms. That's not very manly. Sorry, but it was necessary. Shoji pulled the white tape further apart. Octopus! Bakugo pushed Kirishima to the side, who let out a hey in response. Where is that damn Deku? Shoji raised a brow at Bakugo's brash action. Wow, Midoriya was right about you. That seemed to tick off the explosion quirk user. What did that little shit say? You're predictable, Shoji answered calmly. What? Small explosions went off in Bakugo's hand. Where is that damn nerd? I'm gonna kill him. Dude, chill. Kirishima put his hand on Bakugo's shoulder, but the blonde ripped his shoulder out of his grasp. Where is he? Bakugo shouted at Shoji, who didn't flinch at the venom dripping from his opponent's mouth. Tell me before I blow you up, and force you to tell me. This was getting out of hand, and Kirishima knew it. If they stand around arguing with Shoji, then they'll run out of time to find the bomb, and win the exercise. For all they knew, that was why Shoji was here. To keep them occupied. Tell me, god damn it! Bakugo leapt at Shoji with explosions going off in his hand. The taller teen was able to leap out of the way just before Bakugo could even graze him. The hand impacted the floor where Shoji had just been standing, and blew up with a loud explosion. Don't run! Bakugo pulled his hand out from the hole in the floor, and chased after Shoji, who had put some distance between them. Bakugo, wait! Kirishima called, but the blonde either didn't hear or was ignoring him, because he kept trying to land a hit on Shoji, who was doing a surprisingly good job of dodging every explosive swipe that Bakugo was aiming at him. From the corner of his eye, Kirishima saw a moving shadow stalking towards Bakugo. Before he could warn him, the shadow leapt out towards the explosion quirk user. Shoji batted away the explosive hand heading towards his chest. He was on the defensive right now because Bakugo was relentlessly attacking him. The only thing that would make this situation worse was if Kirishima joined in the attack, but the hardened quirk user's partner was attacking too wildly. If he tried to help, then he might get a few explosions to his person. When the masked teen spotted the moving shadow behind Bakugo, he decided to keep the blonde's attention on him so that he didn't notice it, as well. Watch out! Kirishima's shout made Bakugo glance back just in time to see the redhead tackle the shadow behind him, making the two go tumbling away from him. Kirishima put his hands on the wrists of the person who tried to sneak attack Bakugo. Got ya, Midoriya! He shouted, as his captured target struggled beneath him. Izuku looked up at Kirishima, and sucked in his breath in shock. Look out! He shouted. Huh! Kirishima looked over his shoulder to see his teammate descending towards him with his hand curled, and explosions going off in it. There you are, Deku! Bakugo shouted. Die! Izuku felt Kirishima's grip loosen. He used that opportunity to quickly roll the two of them out of the way just before an explosion went off where they had previously been lying. Kirishima opened his eyes, and saw that Midoriya was now standing above him, and staring at Bakugo, who was crouched and glaring. The right side of Midoriya's mask was burned off, but his face didn't have any permanent damage to it. Midoriya, what now? Shoji addressed his teammate well, keeping an eye on the opposing two. Change of plans. Shoji. Izuku tightened his fists, as he glared at Bakugo, who was stalking towards him. You need to go, and protect the bomb. I'll keep them occupied. What? But how can? Trust me, Shoji. You're the best person to protecting the bomb right now. The taller teen wanted to say something, but the mouth on his tentacle closed. He nodded his head, and ran down the corridor. Shitty hair. Kirishima shook his shock off when he heard Bakugo shout at him, follow the octopus. But, now. The volume he used made the two in the corridor jump in surprise. Kirishima gritted his teeth. He didn't like how he was being treated by his teammate, but if they didn't find the bomb then they would lose, and losing was not manly. So he got up, and followed after the retreating form of Shoji. Once the two were around the corner, Bakugo smirked at Izuku, who was trembling slightly. Now I can finally beat some answers out of you. He punched his fist into his other hand, making an explosion go off. Shoji was fast. Kirishima had to give it to the guy. For someone so big, he was putting quite a bit of distance between them. They had been running from the first floor all the way to the fourth floor of the building, neither one pausing in their run in fear of either losing sight, in Kirishima's case, or getting caught, in Shoji's case. When the taller team turned a corner, that was the first time during their chase that Kirishima lost sight of Shoji. He picked up his pace to try and see where his opponent had vanished. The redhead turned the same corner, and looked down the corridor for any signs of the Dupliarm's user, but the corridor was silent and empty. He couldn't have gotten far, Kirishima thought, as he scanned corridor for any evidence of where Shoji had gone, so that means the bomb is on this floor. He opened the door closest to him, and peeked inside, but the room was empty. I need to hurry up, he thought, as he moved on to the next room. I don't know how much time I have left. Before Kirishima could check the third room, he heard something hit the floor in a room a door down. Either it was rats or he found the room where the bomb was. Abandoning the door he was about to open, Kirishima grabbed the handle of the door, and carefully opened it to peek inside. In the far corner of the room was Shoji with a crate in his hands. He was busy finding a spot for it in a huge pile of crates that was stacked in the corner of the room. That's gotta be where the bomb is, Kirishima thought. He quietly made his way in the room, and tried to stealthily make his way towards his opponent, who was reaching up to put the crate on the top of the pile. He was so focused on making sure his opponent didn't hear him that he failed to notice the can on the floor. Clang! Kirishima froze when his foot kicked the can. His opponent also noticed the sudden noise. An eye appeared on one of the taller teen's 6 tentacles to look back. Damn! Shoji dropped the crate in his hands, and spun around to face his opponent. You got here faster than I thought you would. I would have taken longer, but you got sloppy. Kirishima hardened his hands and held them up. I'm guessing that the bomb is behind those crates, isn't it? No, Shoji averted his original eyes. I knew it, the redhead grinned in triumph. He reached up to his ear, and pushed a button on his commutator Bakugo. I found the bomb. After waiting a moment, he got a reply. Well? What the hell are you waiting for? An invitation? Touch the fucking thing. He cringed at the volume. Midoriya. Kirishima has found the bomb. He looked over to see that his opponent was also speaking to his communicator. Shoji nodded his head at whatever Midoriya was telling him. Understood. Both occupants of the room took their hands away from their earpieces, and focused on the other. Who would win? The attacking party or the defending one? All Might Sensei? Yes, young Ida. All Might glanced over his shoulder to the armored teen standing among the crowd of 1A students. If I may, Ida put his hand down. I understand that this exercise is to prepare us for a situation in which we face villains. Well, this works in favor of the hero team gaining experience. What do the villain team hope to gain? An astute observation. Young Ida All Might turned back to screens, as he addressed the team, and by association, the rest of the class. Instead of me explaining, does one of you want to try and guess why this exercise benefits both teams? The class looked amongst themselves, trying to come up with an answer for Ida's question. Though many of them couldn't come up with a concrete answer, some did attempt to answer. Is it because they will know what it's like to handle defeat? To put ourselves in the shoes of villains, so we can think like them? Deter us from trying to become villains? All good guesses. But no All Might held up one finger. There is one reason that stands out above it all, and that is, both teams are heroes in this exercise. The person who spoke was a tall girl with her black hair pulled back into a fanned-out ponytail. Her hero outfit was revealing, to say the least. It was a red sleeveless leotard with the skin exposed from her neck all the way down to her navel, with red boots on her feet. Around her waist were 2 gold-colored utility belts. However, they are villains. As well, she crossed her arms under her impressive bust, which drew gazes from some of the boys. Care to explain, young Yayorosa? Gladly. Yayorosa nodded her head. As All Might Sensei explained in the beginning, the hero team has to find the bomb before the time is up to simulate a situation where the heroes have to stop a terrorist attack. Now, if we replace the bomb with a person being targeted, then the two teams switch roles. The villain turned hero team have to protect the target, and the hero turned villain team are trying to capture the target. The whole class stared at the Yayorosa, who looked back at them in confusion. Didn't you guys know? She put her one hand on her cheek, and looked up at the ceiling. I thought it was obvious. No, it obviously wasn't. The class sweat dropped. Off to the back of the class, Uraraka stared at Yayorosa in astonishment. The smartest person she knew in the class was Ida, if his achievements in his junior high were anything to go by. But even he looked astounded by Yayorosa's explanation. Why, Yayorosa-san is so smart. She blinked. Don't you think so, Ashido? Ashido? Uraraka turned to her teammate. The pink girl was staring up at the screens with her brows furrowed. Following the direction of her gaze, the gravity-negating quirk user saw that Ashido was looking at a screen where Midoriya and Bakugo were standing in the hallway. Bakugo seemed to be shouting something at his opponent. "Don't worry about Deku-kun," she patted Ashido's shoulder, which snapped her out of the daze she was in. "He won't lose." "Huh?" While Mina blinked in confusion, as her brain processed what she just heard. "Oh yeah. I know he is." It's just Mina gazing at the floor with a worried expression. "Just?" Uraraka tilted her head to the side. Bakugo Mina almost spat his name out. The guy was so quick to try, and hurt Midori yesterday after he saw him use his quirk. The only reason he never got to was because Aizawa-sensei was there. Now he can try it all over again. And just blame the exercise. Mina tightened her fist in anger. "If anything happens to Midori, I'll..." "Don't worry." Uraraka patted Ashido's shoulder again with a calming smile on her face. "If he tries to do anything drastic, then I'm sure All Might Sensei will." "Bakugo, stop. Don't pull that pin." The two teammates turned towards the screen again. All Might was shouting into a handheld mic. "If you pull that pin, Midoriya will die." "What?" The two, and the rest of the class shouted in surprise. Kirishima huffed and puffed as he stared at his opponent, who also seemed to be breathing heavily behind his mask. So far the fight they were having consisted of Kirishima trying to bulldoze his way past Shoji, but the taller teen was always able to block and keep him away from the hidden bomb. Shoji had attempted to capture Kirishima with the white tape during the one chance that he was able to catch him, but the redhead had hardened his arms and cut the tape. In the same vein, as his opponent Kirishima had tried to wrap his tape around Shoji, but the multi-armed teen was able to wrestle the tape away from Kirishima and toss it out the window. As a rule, they weren't allowed to use the other team's capture tape. "You're very fast." Kirishima deactivated his quirk on his right hand and wiped away some sweat on his forehead. "And you're very durable." Shoji acknowledged Kirishima's abilities as well. "However, you're not getting past me." That was an argument that Kirishima couldn't refute. As durable as his quirk made him, he wasn't as fast as Shoji, who had enough strength to keep him away. The only way that Kirishima was going to get past his opponent required nothing less than an act of God. The two opponents heard a loud explosion echo from outside the open doorway. Before they could wonder what made that sound, though they had a sneaking suspicion of who made it, the building shook slightly. Behind Shoji, the pile of boxes that were acting as a line of defense for the bomb wobbled before it started falling towards the teen standing in front of it. Crash! The boxes fell on the taller teen, that let out a cry of surprise when the boxes descended upon him and trapped him beneath them. "Shoji, are you okay?" Kirishima stopped mid-sentence when he saw what was hidden behind the boxes. It wasn't the bomb that was hidden behind the boxes. In fact, there wasn't anything behind the makeshift box wall. "Shit!" Kirishima turned on his heel and ran out the door. He had been tricked. Just as he left, Shoji used his one arm that wasn't trapped under the boxes to press his communicator. "Midoriya, plan B," he grunted. Time is running out against Kirishima now. He didn't know how much time they had left, and since that wasn't the room where the bomb was, then that meant he was back to square one. Could they even move the bomb? All Might never said anything about that, but he had assumed that they would leave the bomb in the same room it originally was. It was unhandled, but a smart move nonetheless. Kirishima turned a corner to search for the next set of rooms down that corridor. Boom! He was blown off his feet by a sudden explosion that totally outshone the previous one. The floor ahead of him exploded into a strong gust of wind. When the gust of wind died down, Kirishima put his arm down, which he was using to shield his face from the debris that flew towards him. What he saw shocked him. Where there was a floor, there was now a huge hole that he'd not be able to jump even if he took a running leap. Looking up made Kirishima even more flabbergasted. It wasn't just the floor that was destroyed. The gust of wind flew straight through the ceiling and exited the roof of the building. A loud siren went off. The Almighty spoke over the speakers. "The villain team wins." Now, Class 1A was joined by Team D and Team A minus Izuku, who was carried off to the nurse's office. Well, not as damaged as his teammate. Shoji had a few cuts where Kirishima's quirk cut him, and a few bruises from the tower of boxes falling on top of him. On the hero team side, Kirishima was covered in dust from the corridor exploding close to him. Besides that, he looked relatively fine. Bakugo was the only one of all of them who didn't look like he was even part of the fight. He had a distraught look on his face as he and his fellow test takers stood before the class and All Might. "Would anyone like to tell me why the villain team gets extra points?" All Might looked at the class expectantly. "Isn't it because they won?" Karo asked a girl with a green bodysuit that had an overall frog theme to her, from her big-eyed goggles on her head to her flipper-like boots that looked like frogs' toes. "Not really," young Azri. All Might shook his head. "It was not a fact of who won and who lost that determines who gets a special mention in this exercise." "Sir, may I?" Once again it was Yayorozu who seemed to know the answer. At All Might's nod, she proceeded to explain the reason that the villain team got extra points is because through all of this they seemed to be one step ahead of the hero team. They used some deception to get the job done by making Kirishima think that the bomb was in the same room as Shoji, and cutting off his route to the actual bomb. A brilliant strategy on your part, Shoji. She nodded her head in acknowledgement of the masked boy, who seemed confused at the praise. But it wasn't my plan. The teen calmly pointed to the screen which had a paused video feed of him and Midoriya talking before the match began. Midoriya thought out everything. What? Now it was Yaoyorozu who was confused. I had assumed that it was you who came up with that plan when you two started moving the boxes around the room. It was Midoriya's plan to start stacking the boxes. I didn't have any part in forming the plan. Shoji shook his head. Would you care to explain? Young Shoji All Might knew what the plan was because he had been listening from the minute Midoriya and Shoji entered the building. Yes sir. The gray-haired teen cleared his throat, which was weird because he was speaking through a mouth on his one arm just before the match began. Midoriya and I started talking. Flashback. We're teammates. Midoriya. Shoji stood up. Whether I wanted to or not, I'm along for the ride. So let's do our best to win. He put out one of his multiple hands. Right. Izuku smiled behind his mouth guard and shook the taller teen's hand. So what is the plan? Shoji asked when they broke off their handshake. I don't know. Izuku tapped his mouth guard and thought, I've never thought about how to be a villain before. Shoji looked up at the fake bomb. You seem to know quite a bit about Bakugo. Is there anything about him that you're sure he will do during this exercise? If we can predict at least his movements, then that just leaves Kirishima as the outlier. I might have something. Izuku looked around the room. First we need to move to another room. Why? Shoji raised a brow. Wouldn't leaving the bomb alone just invite them to touch it without us even knowing? Remember what All Might said before. Izuku walked towards the door with his partner following him. Kaken and Kirishima have no idea where the bomb is, so we can use that to our advantage. The two walked around the corner and down the next corridor before entering one of the first few rooms close to the end of the corridor, or beginning depending on your viewpoint. How are we going to do that? Shoji asked, as he watched Midoriya walk over and pick up one of the crates in the room. We're going to make them think that the bomb is in here. Izuku put the crate in the furthest corner of the room. He went to grab another box, but Shoji picked it up before he could. The taller teen carried the box to the corner where Izuku was beginning to make a makeshift wall of boxes. I get it. We protect this room and keep them away from the boxes. By the time they realize that the bomb isn't here, then they will have lost a considerable amount of time. Shoji started stacking boxes alongside Izuku. But how do we lure them here? By going to them. The gray-haired teen turned to his partner in surprise just to listen. We try to capture them, and if that fails, then one of us runs to this room and the other preoccupies one of them. The other will be forced to follow to try and capture the bomb. With any luck, that will be Kirishima. Why do you say that? We'll be on the hunt for me, so I'll stay behind and keep him from following. He will be looking to start a fight, so that should buy us some time. Kirishima's quirk only allows him to harden his body, but that doesn't give him a lot of mobility. From what I saw yesterday, you're very strong and fast, so you're the best person to keep him at bay. As Izuku laid out his plan, his stutter started fading away. Okay, I get the plan to lead them here, but what if Kirishima makes it past me and sees that the bomb isn't here? Or if he realizes that this is a distraction? Izuku put down the box in his hand and took out the earpiece communicator that All Might gave them. I'm going to lead Kaken to the hallway on the first floor that's below the hallway where the room with the bomb is. Then I'm going to put the earpiece in his ear using a Detroit smash on the ceiling above us. Since the bomb is on the far end of the room, it won't get caught up in the blast radius. Shoji stared at Midoriya in astonishment. The force of his punch was enough to take down a giant robot like he was punching paper. Blasting a huge hole in the building had to be child's play to him. That plan is very well thought out. Shoji stacked another box on the growing pile. But do you think that you can take Bakugo on your own? You said it yourself. His quirk isn't anything to scoff at. One wrong move, and he could seriously injure you. Don't worry about me. Izuku gave him a grin. It had some repressed hesitation, but he was doing his best to keep it that way. I'll make sure Kaken doesn't do any serious damage. I've seen how he's fought before. End flashback. After that, it was just a matter of locating the two of them. Midoriya said that Bakugo would make a lot of noise to lure us to him, and even if they didn't, I would have used my quirk to listen for their footsteps. Shoji lowered his mouth hand. The class stared at Shoji in astonishment. Midoriya was one step ahead of the opposing team, and he used that to his team's advantage. While a blonde guy with a black streak in his hair broke the silence that descended upon the crowd. Never thought Midoriya would be so crafty. I think you mean smart. A boy with a bird head spoke up. He laid out his plan and had a backup just in case that plan fell through. As smart as it was, there's one thing that he didn't take into account. Yaoyorozu spoke up. His quirk leaves him defenseless after he uses it, and pitted against someone like Bakugo, you don't want to be handicapped like that. A chill descended upon the class, as they remembered the brutal way Bakugo battered around Midoriya, and how his opponent looked towards the end of the match. Yes, well, does anyone want to give a critique about the hero team? And I think we should let the others try. Young Yaoyorozu's black-haired girl put her hand down in embarrassment. Throughout the whole critique, Bakugo had been silent. He was in shock. He lost to the one person that was lower than the dirt compared to him, and Deku hadn't even used his quirk on him. He outsmarted him from the beginning of the match to the end. Bakugo felt someone glaring at him. He looked up to see who it was, and forced himself to not step back in shock. The pink girl with the raccoon eyes that had been attached to Deku since the first day was glaring at him so intensely, like she wanted to set him on fire, and dance on the ashes. Now don't go and injure yourself like that again, young man. I'd hate to have you become a regular here. Recovery Girl's parting words rang out in Izuku's head. It was only the second day at U.A, and he was already a regular at the nurse's office. Even in junior high he never went to the nurse's office that often. Well, considering that the nurse that was there was a chain smoker who barely gave a damn about the students, unless they were seriously injured, he, and many others, didn't really want to go there. I was really lucky to get away with only a broken arm this time. Izuku looked down at his bandaged arm, which was being supported by a sling. But I can't keep making others worry about me. The sun was already starting to set by the time Izuku made it to 1A's classroom. Someone had been kind enough to bring him his yellow school bag, which had his school uniform in it. So he didn't need to waste time retrieving his bag from the class. In fact, since he was changed, and had his notebooks, Izuku was within his rights to leave. Classes were over for the day. He could just deal with Aizawa's grim demeanor about him missing afternoon classes tomorrow. But he needed to do something. Hopefully he hasn't left yet. Izuku reached forward, and gripped the door handle with his good hand. Taking a deep breath, he pulled open the erect piece of wood. Hey! It's Midoriya! It took less than a second for Midoriya to be swarmed by a small group of his classmates. Leading the group was Kirishima, who had a huge grin on his face. This was the last kind of welcoming that Izuku expected the minute he entered the class. Maybe a slight acknowledgement that he was there would have made more sense to him ere high. He awkwardly waved his free hand. Dude! Kirishima put an arm around Izuku's shoulder, and pulled him into his side, being careful not to put strain on his injured arm. That plan you came up with was so manly, crafty, but manly nonetheless. It wasn't anything special. Izuku looked off to the side, and blushed. I was the villain in that exercise, so I don't think I should be praised. You should be praised, man. A tall teen with big lips spoke up. Hey, name's Rikido Sato, and All Might Sensei told us about the true meaning of the test, so no matter who won, both teams were heroes. Huh, he's right, Karo. A frog-faced girl stepped out from behind the taller boy. I'm Tsuyoaji, but you can call me Tsu. All Might said that instead of looking at it like you're a villain guarding a bomb, you had to see it as the bomb being someone to protect, and you're the hero who was protecting them from the villains. Karo. Midoriya processed the information he was just given. It was a plausible way of looking at the exercise, so it wasn't just heroes versus villains. When you put it that way, Izuku felt slightly better about his win now. All Might also said that you got extra points for your plan. Walking up to the group was Shoji with a black-haired girl that had cat-like eyes, and everyone seemed to agree. Hey Shoji, are you okay? Midoriya inquired of his former teammate, who raised a brow. Before he could say anything, the girl next to him spoke up. Are you okay? Is this the real question, Midoriya? The tall girl looked down at Izuku. Oh, where are my manners? My name is Momo Yaoyorozu. Nice to meet you, Yaoyorozu. That goes for all of you. Izuku bowed his head in greeting. I'm fine actually. Recovery Girl said my arm should be healed by tomorrow. That's good to hear. Yaoyorozu nodded her head. As everyone else has said, your plan was ingenious. It also seemed to inspire everyone that was watching. After your match, everyone started thinking outside of the box, and got more creative with guarding the bomb. Well, your plan was almost flawless. There is one thing that you shouldn't have done. Izuku was astounded at the sheer amount of words that Yaoyorozu just let loose. It's like he was getting an oral report on his schoolwork by a teacher. Yaoyorozu pointed at Izuku's bandaged arm. You needlessly used all of your power in one punch, and disabled yourself. I thought that you had better control over your quirk from yesterday's quirk assessment test. You're right. Midoriya glanced at his bandaged arm. It was careless, huh? An uneasy silence fell over the group by the door. I think you brought his spirits down, Yaoyorozu. Karo C looked up at the taller girl, who was baffled for a moment before she realized how she made her assessment sound, and how Izuku might have taken it. I didn't mean to berate you, Midoriya. Yayorozu bowed her head. I was just giving you some feedback is all. No. I was just thinking about the same thing, as I was walking back from the nurse's office. Izuku put his one hand up in a calming motion. I know you weren't being mean. Yayorozu let out a sigh of relief, and lifted her head. Thank goodness I didn't offend you somehow. Come on, man. The group standing by the door turned their attention to the side of the room. A blonde boy with a black lightning streak in his hair was standing at the desk of a boy who had a bird's head. The blonde was the one who was talking. Just think about it. It will be awesome. The boy with the bird face didn't seem like he was listening to him though. If anything, he looked annoyed. For the last time, no? The bird boy opened his one eye, and looked up at the boy leaning on his desk, and stopped asking me already. My answer is never going to change. Hey man, I get it. The blonde boy stood back, and held his hands up. I hear ya. The bird boy sighed in relief, and was about to get up, but the blonde boy continued talking. You're just being grumpy about it. The blonde crossed his arms, and smirked like he just figured out some groundbreaking evidence. Don't worry, I can work with that. You can be grumpy, and I can be not so grumpy. What? The bird boy stared at him like he just grew a second head. Yeah, you can be grump, and I can be not so grump. The blonde held up his two thumbs, and grinned at the other boy, who just kept staring at him. What's that about? Izuku glanced at the people around him. Apparently, Yayorozu spoke up, and Kaminari, the one with the blonde hair, has the idea that he and Tokoyami would make a great team. The two of them were paired up as the hero team, and after the test Kaminari started trying to get Tokoyami to form a team with him. Oh really? The door at the back of the class slid open, and two people walked in. Are you sure that you're okay? I told you, Urara, I'm over it. But you were. Oh. It's Deku, Mina, and Uraraka entered the room with books in their hands. They seemed to be talking about something, but their conversation ended when they saw the crowd of people standing at the other door. More specifically, the person the crowd was surrounding. The books in Mina's arms clattered to the floor. She ran towards Izuku, who froze up at seeing his friend rushing him with her arms open. Midori! She shouted, and launched herself at the boy. Kirishima stepped back the minute he saw Mina lunge at the green-haired boy. Mina wrapped her arms around Izuku the minute she got close. I'm so glad that you're okay. Later, Izuku would swear that he heard a low squeal of joy. But right now he was too busy processing the fact that his female friend was hugging the life out of him, and that he could feel all the blood rushing to his cheeks. The horned girl stepped back to look over Izuku's injuries. Well, you look alright, but why isn't your arm fully healed? Oh, well, the recovery girl said that it had to do with how much stamina I have. Izuku chuckled nervously. Ashido. Ida came running up to the group making a chopping hand motion. That is not the way to greet someone who is injured. You could have caused more damage. I was just worried about him. Ida, geez, relax. Mina rolled her eyes. Look, Midori doesn't mind. It's fine. Mina made sure not to squeeze on my injured arm. But, oh, just leave them be, Ida. Uraraka walked up to the group. She had put the books she was carrying in her hands on one of the desks along with the ones Mina dropped to the floor. Uraraka smiled at Izuku. I'm glad to see that you're alright, Deku. Thanks. Izuku rubbed the back of his neck, and smiled shyly. He glanced over to where his desk was, and noticed that the seat in front of his was empty. Uraraka, where's Kaken? Once again the group had an unnatural quietness descended upon them. He or Bakugo left. Uraraka answered that some of us tried to stop him from leaving, but he wouldn't listen to us. He seemed unnaturally quiet. Izuku's eyes widened. He spun around to run after his former friend. If he hurried, then he might be able to catch him before the explosive blonde left school grounds. He was halted when someone grabbed the sleeve of his less injured arm. He, and everyone else, stared at Mina gripping his sleeve. She looked confused. Where are you going, Midori? She asked. I have to catch up to Kaken. I need to talk, Izuku answered. Mina's grip tightened. No. Huh? No. No, you don't. Mina shook her head. You do not need to talk to him. But Mina, I said no, Midoriya. Her shout echoed around the room. Now everybody was now focused on the two of them. Remembering that they weren't alone, Mina walked past Izuku, and dragged him along with her. Come with me. But a look from the pink girl made Izuku clamp up, and allow himself to be dragged away. After finding an empty classroom, Mina dragged Izuku into the room, and closed the door behind her. She released her grip on Izuku's sleeve, and stood across from the fidgeting boy. Mina, I really need to. What are you doing, Midori? Mina cut him off with a concerned voice. What do you mean, Mina? I mean, what are you doing running after that psycho? Izuku took a step back in shock. Mina looked equal parts shocked and exasperated. Why do you need to talk to him, after what he did to you? She looked down at the slightly less injured arm of her friend. It's complicated. Izuku looked down at his left arm. Mina shook her head, and explained it then. Midori, explain why it's so complicated. Explain why you're running after the guy who threatened to hurt you not once, but thrice, and managed to succeed the third time. What kind of power does he have over you? She was confused. Izuku didn't have to look at her face to see that was the emotion she was feeling right now. From Mina's perspective, he was almost essentially throwing himself on a bomb that was about to explode. I can't say I'm sorry. Izuku clenched his eyes shut. Why? Mina took a step forward, and grabbed his shoulder, and gently shook him. Why can't you tell me? I'm your friend, right? You trust me, right? Izuku took a deep breath. He trusted Mina. Since the day of the entrance exam, Mina had been what Izuku had been denied, as a child. She was his friend. He'd go as far as to say that she was his best friend. She had been there when he was down, and tried to lift him up. She stuck up for him when others were putting him down. He would trust her with his life. But when it came to Kaken, Izuku had to walk that path alone. Other people wouldn't understand what he saw in his former friend, the same former friend who never wasted a second to remind Izuku about his place in the world. Please tell me. Mina's grip on his shoulders tightened for a brief moment before it slackened, and eventually she let go slowly. I see. Mina's voice sounded hollow. Well, I'm sorry for assuming. Why couldn't he say something? He didn't have a problem with telling Shoji about why he wanted to win against Bakugo, but when he was questioned about why he was continually reaching out to the same guy who would rather blow off his hand than take it, he was at an impasse. At some point during Midoriya's inner conflict, Mina had made it to the door. I won't hold you up any longer. By Midoriya. Sniff. It has to do with my quirk not being mine. That seemed to stop Mina in her tracks. He knew that he should stop. His brain was telling him to pretend like it was just a slip of the tongue, but his mouth kept rambling on. Things that I've been hiding my quirk from him since we were kids, but I never lied about that. I never had a quirk. I was diagnosed as quirkless when I was young. But you said you were a late bloomer. Mina still didn't turn around to face him, but he could hear the confusion in her voice. Was that a lie? I had to lie. Izuku bit his lip for a second before he continued talking. To the person who gave me this quirk swore that I should never reveal it. Mina turned around to face him. Clear confusion was on her face. Some unshed tears shimmered in her eyes. Who was it? I can't say. I'm already breaking their trust by saying that this quirk isn't mine. As the two of them stood in silence, that was when Izuku finally realized what he had just blurted out. He smacked a hand over his mouth, and stared at Mina with wide eyes. Where did that all come from? Mina was staring at him with a look of confusion along with a slight edge of disbelief. A quirk that can be transferred to someone else? That sounded like something out of fantasy or fanfiction. What was next? A quirk that lets you steal other people's quirks. You know how strange this sounds, right? Mina ran a hand through her head, and stared at the ground beneath her. Her tears had dried up by now. Lying was an option. He could say that what he told her the first day they met was the truth, and now he was just being emotional. But the seed of doubt had been planted already. Mina wasn't stupid. She couldn't be if she actually got into U.A, never mind the fact that she got first place in the practical course. She'd start paying attention to things about One for All, and eventually she'd put the pieces together. Mina, you can't tell anyone. Izuku bowed his head. His best chance right now was swearing her to silence. Mina's eyes widened in shock. Wait, is it the truth? Her jaw hung down in shock. Why? Izuku gulped. It was his last chance to back out. Yes, I got this quirk from someone else. I never had a dormant quirk. That's something that has never been reported to have happened, trust me. I know. Mina kept staring at her friend in shock, as her brain tried to make sense of everything that it was being fed. Is that why your body breaks after you use this quirk? Well, she wasn't outright stating her dismissal of his ludicrous statement, but there was still doubt mixed in there. Remember when I told you that my body would explode if I didn't train my body? At Mina's nod, Izuku continued talking. That's because this quirk isn't mine. I never grew up with it, so my body never grew around it. Like how your body lets you use acid without melting your skin off. Mina winced. If she had been given her quirk by someone else, then she could have done untold damage to herself, if not killed herself, every time she used it. This is while the pink girl leaned against one of the desks. This is a lot to take in, just give me a moment. It shocked me, as well, when I found out about it. Izuku sighed, and sat down in one of the chairs in the room. I had some doubts myself, but on the day of the entrance exam when I was 50 feet in the air, and that giant 0-point robot had a caved-in face, was when I knew I now had this powerful quirk. The two took a moment to let all the information sink in. Mina now knew that Izuku's quirk was given to him by someone else. How she reacted to that information would determine this major leap in their friendship. It would show how much trust there truly was between the two of them. Then why? Izuku looked up when Mina started speaking. She was still leaning on the desk, but she wasn't making eye contact with him. Why does he have to know? Izuku blinked in confusion. Who? Bakugo. Mina shook her head. In my opinion, that guy should be the last person to know. Because Izuku made a fist. Because I want him to know that I will take control of this quirk. and use it to finally beat him. That doesn't mean you have to tell him. What? Izuku furrowed his brows in confusion. What do you think will happen if he knew that your quirk was given to you by someone else? Mina made eye contact with him again. Concerned in her gaze, he'd either call you a liar or he'd be screaming it at the top of his lungs or, even worse, he'd try to beat the answers out of you again. But he needed to know that I wasn't lying. He doesn't. Mina pushed off the desk and made her way to her friend. When she got close, she put her hands on Izuku's shoulders. If he wanted to wallow in his own disbelief, then let him. You have to worry about yourself. You have to control this quirk. I don't want you to keep hurting yourself every time. If you keep worrying about what he thinks about you, then you'll never get stronger. Now tell me, why does he need to know that you didn't lie to him? Izuku took a deep breath. He never gave up when he was faced with a problem. He was always working hard to achieve everything he wanted. Sure, he wasn't always the nicest person to be around, but to me he always was what a hero should be. Maybe I still think that he and I could be friends again. You could say I RESOW. Mina had smacked Izuku over the head with a look of disbelief on her face. She kept smacking Izuku over the head. Are you stupid? She shouted, finally ceasing in her assault on Izuku's head. Izuku nursed the bump on his head. Bakugo is far from what a hero should be. He doesn't deserve your praise. Do you think of him as a friend? If he's your friend, then I have to be a freak-end saint. But Kaken, even that. Mina shook his shoulders. He doesn't deserve a nickname. He's an egotistical asshole that doesn't care who he hurts to get what he wants. He's not Kaken to you, Midori. He's Bakugo. End of story. In fact, if you want to call him a nickname, then he should be known as Bakugo. Izuku felt the corner of his mouth twitch. That was the first time in his life that someone wasn't kissing Bakugo's butt. It was very relieving if he was honest with himself. But maybe Mina was right. If he compared what she was like, as a friend, to what Bakugo used to treat him, and everyone else, as when he got his quirk, then she was right. She'd be a modern-day saint. You're right, Mina? Izuku sighed. Since you've known me, when have I been wrong? Mina grinned, and released Izuku from her hold. Izuku laughed. He felt relieved. He felt happy. Hey Mina, can I ask you something? The two curly-haired friends walked down one of the deserted hallways. They had already been to their class, and picked up Mina's school bag. It was kind of nostalgic for the two of them. Here they were again, walking down the hallways of U.A after Izuku had gotten a pep talk from Mina. Mina looked over to Izuku. What's up, dude? You're taking my secret very well. I expected you to think I was lying or saying that I didn't deserve it. Is my name Bakugo? No, that's right. It's not. I would never put down my best friend. Mina grinned. It's obvious that the person who gave you that trusted you to use it right. If your actions during the entrance exam meant anything, then it was well placed. You're still the sweet heroic guy I've known for almost a month now. Your past isn't going to make me think any less of you. Izuku felt his heart flutter. Mina had called him her best friend. Not only that, she accepted his situation, and was still willing to be around him. Mina blinked in surprise when she felt one arm wrap around her. She was about to say something. Maybe she would tease the normally shy boy, but when she felt the tears land on the shoulder of her blazer, she held her tongue. She instead lifted her arms, and wrapped them around Izuku's midsection, and stroked his back. A good friend will always provide a shoulder to cry on, and in Izuku's case he needed that both literally and figuratively. So let me get this straight. All Might Side Ishido knows that your quirk was given to you, and that you never had a quirk to begin with. Yes, Izuku squeaked out. The boy was sitting in his room with his phone to his ear, and talking to mentor/idol. After the intense conversation he had with Mina a few hours ago, and what he revealed to her, he had to let All Might know what was going on. Do you know the word lie, young Midoriya? You could hear the tiredness in All Might's tone. I'm sorry. Izuku quietly apologized. I just blurted it out without thinking. I made Mina promise not to tell anyone, and I never said who gave me the quirk, or even the name, so there's still that. He chuckled nervously. Sigh. All Might sighed again. You're sure that Ishido was the only one you told, right? Not Bakugo? When I caught up to him he was lost in thought, and brushed me off. Surprisingly, he looked like he had tears in his eyes. That was shocking to hear. So Bakugo did have tears. The more you know. Actually, I was about to go tell him that I never lied to him, but Mina stopped me, and I guess it just kind of came out. There was silence on All Might's side, and Izuku thought that maybe his mentor had put down the phone, but the symbol of peace spoke up again after a while. Okay, I'm not going to hold this against you. It was a slip of the tongue I got. If you say that Ishido won't tell anyone, then I'll take your word for it. This quirk is as much yours now as it is mine. But that doesn't mean you should go running your mouth to every Tom, Dick, and Harry you consider your friends. I promise that I won't. Good. Just remember that this knowledge is dangerous to not only the wielder, but those that know the truth, as well. You're lucky that you didn't say anything about who gave it to you or what it is. Izuku gulped. He dodged a bullet here. Well, it was more like he got grazed by it, but it's better than being hit. He had to keep a better lid on One for All in the future. The less people that knew, the better. Alright, young Midoriya. I think it's late enough. You have school in the morning, so get to bed. Yes, sir. Izuku saluted, and instantly felt the blood rush to his cheeks. You just saluted, didn't you? No. All Might chuckled. Good night, young Midoriya. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.